Hey guys, this is your buddy Jaycie. Welcome to this tutorial to make 2D sprites using Blender. I'm going to show you how to use a 3D model to generate 2D sprites for sprite animations and gaming projects. I use this method in my Maple Rush 6 entry. Now this sequence you guys see in this part is actually made with 3D models. I'm going to show you this method using Maple sprites, but you can pretty much do it with any type of character. The difficulty, of course, depends on your character design. Remember, we are making this in very low resolution, so small details in the design might not work as well. You can render out single sprites, animations, and even simulations that interact with the character. Now let me first demonstrate. I got my character set up, I got my Blender file set up, and as you can see, it's all a 3D model. When I hit the render button, I get a pixelated character, and it looks just like my base character. If I were to rotate some limbs and maybe even tweak the light source, you see how the light source change, and then I'm going to hit the render again. You see how everything follows. And it's the same for animations. Here I got a animation of Teddy, and if I hit the render animation button, you see the whole sequence get rendered as pixel. Before jumping into this, you should already know how to use Blender. I won't be going through the basics here. There are plenty of tutorials out there where you can learn the software. You need to know how to do 3D modeling in order to make your own character set. You need to know how to rig so you can pose your character. You need to know the basic concept of material. And if you want to do animate a sequence, you obviously need to know how to animate in 3D. Now for this particular method, the material making and the rendering must be done in Blender. But you can create your 3D model and your animation in different program like Maya, and then import it into Blender, set up the material, and make the final render. Now for you Maya users, if you want to use your models and animation data from Maya to Blender, then you can select your mesh. Here you can see I got animation data. Go to Cache, Alembic Cache, and export them. Set your range. And if you want your UVs to follow, select UV right. And go to Blender, go to File, Import, Alembic. And you should be getting something like this. Now warning, if you change that location of that Alembic file or name, that animation data will be gone. To get this back, select your object, go to Object Constraints, hit Browse, and select the right location. Now finally Blender. Let's go through the initial setup first. I got my model imported, I got a camera set up, I got a sun lamp as light source pointing at my character. Now first in the setup, you should be considering which camera you should be using, according to what result you would like to have. You can choose between the two, perspective or orthographic. Let's go ahead and compare the two. Here I have Vash's character where he punches towards the camera. When I render out these with different camera, you can see how different the results are. The orthographic camera don't mind how close the object is to the camera, so you can see the front and back hands in this are about the same size. And in the perspective shot, you can see that the back hand is slightly smaller. You can also see how it overall gets positioned and rendered, as you can see here by the feet. For use in 2D animation, I recommend just go with the orthographic camera to get the traditional 2D and flattened look. Unless you want to do perspective shots and sequence, you could use the perspective camera. I'm going to use the orthographic lens for this demonstration. Next, we'll be looking at the render settings. You'll be rendering back and forth, so it's best to have the settings done. I got the setup file here with the default rendering settings. We're going to use the default Blender renderer. When I render out, I get this. Just a normal render from Blender default settings. Now there are 4 things here you should be adjusting. First one is resolution. Now Maple sprites are down to around 64-ish pixels on the height. You want the resolution down to as much as the base character, and it's around 64 in this case. Zoom in a bit with the camera to have the character fill the screen and fit the resolution. Now we get about the same resolution as our base character. You can count the pixels and it should be around like our base character. Now second thing, To get rid of that blurriness, you should turn off anti-aliasing. Now we get cleaner edges on the model. The third thing is to get transparent background. Go to shading and set the alpha to transparent. Make sure the output is set to PNG and RGBA. The fourth and last thing is to check the freestyle box here to get our outline. You can adjust the value as necessary, but 0.3 is about right, 33. We're going to talk about lines more later. So now you can render out models to pixels. Now next we're going to get the materials done and get rid of all the blurriness inside the character. Now we are going to set up the base material. Make a new material and use the ramp node and slide the alpha to 100%. Next, we want to get rid of that smooth transition between the colors here, and we do that by changing the interpolation to constant. I'm going to slide this over here. Now we got rid of that between the colors. But there's still this blur on each color. We remove that by using result as our input. To remove that specular highlight, set specular intensity to 0. And we get a flattened look for each color. And leave the rest as it is. Now this base material is going to work for all our character parts. Now the colors should be the ones we need from our base character. Here for instance the skin colors. For my character I need a brown skin tone, and I need to add more color stops since I have more shades in my palette. Now I already did that beforehand. I apply it, I hit render, you see we get our color. If you're not happy with how it shades, you can keep adjusting the sliders here to adjust the shades. We are now going to study two ways of adding different parts of our character using the base material we just created. There are two ways of doing it, and after learning these ways, you should plan ahead when you make your 3D models to best suit how you would like to work. First way is to have different models. Here you see the shirt is under the mesh. I'm going to choose our base material, make a copy of it, change its name to what it is. Now everything else is set up. I just need to change the colors. And keep rendering and adjusting the shades till I'm happy. That's the first way. Second way is to use the faces in this body model. In edit mode, I'm going to select the faces that's going to have that shirt material we just created. About there. Then I go to the material tab, hit the plus, choose the shirt material we just created, and hit assign. Render out. You see those faces now act like a shirt. But we are missing those inner lines that we would have gotten from the freestyle rendering options if we were to use separate objects. So we need to add those lines manually. Just like how we applied the materials to the faces as the shirt, we select the faces that we want to be aligned. Plus sign, base material, and we change the color to only black. And there we go. Now which method is best depends on your design, but I find that learning both techniques and combining the two provides you the best results. For my character in this case, I would use this separate mesh for the shirt, and then use the faces of this mesh to apply that green colors here, and also the yellow dots and black lines here. I find that gives me the best result. Now let's talk about lines. We already got our outline done with the freestyle rendering option. You can access more options of this in the render layer section. And here you see more freestyle settings. Now with the freestyle rendering option enabled, all visible objects that is treated as separate meshes gets an outline by default. If you don't want some specific objects to have outline, or you want those objects to have different colors of outline, then you need to play with the inclusive and exclusive options here in the group selection. Let's have a closer look on this. The freestyle rendering creates a line set and is set to include everything by default. And the exclusive option here gives you the option to exclude objects in a group from this calculation. What you have to do is select the objects or multiple objects, make them into a group, Ctrl G. I'm going to call it group exclude, and then select it from the list and choose exclusive. Now this group will be excluded from the options in the default line set, and you get no outline. Furthermore, to give these objects different outline, you can make a new line set. Select that specific group in the list and choose the inclusive option. Change the color or whatever option you want to tweak, and it will be different from the original, which you excluded from the default line set. And you can keep adding more line sets as necessary. Something to consider is your mesh will be visible on the side too, so watch out for meshes without outline because they might not be what you expected. We're now going to talk about a few stuff when making your model according to what we have learned so far. When making your model, you need to always consider how it will look after you render it into a low resolution. Remembering you're rendering it into a very low resolution, so all the soft edges detail will be gone anyway, so don't worry about every small detail and having a lot of polygons, because that just makes it very difficult to handle and apply materials to the faces. Smoothness of the mesh affects both outline and shading. Besides the outline around the mesh, if you have well-defined edges in your model, the freestyle rendering option will render that as a line too. So keep that in mind when increasing your poly amount and using smooth shading. When making your character, of course you need to consider the polygon count enough for it to be rigged. So keep the polygon count not too high and not too low. We have seen how we apply our materials and outline, so when making the model you should always have this in mind. Is it easier to make different meshes to make it easier to apply the materials, or is it better to keep them as one and apply on the faces? What will I do with the mesh in the future? Will the character have different outfits and such? Let's say you got the shirt separated, then you can easily change the shirt and render it in the future by just replacing the mesh. And outline, do I want that specific part to have different outline color, or do I even want outline at all? And how will it look when rendered on the side view if I don't have outline? So there is some stuff to consider, but when you have been doing it for some time, you will get a feel about how things should be looking and what you should do and what you should not do. Now that you guys know how to render things to pixel, you know how to apply the right materials, you know how to edit outlines, you should just go and try and do it. So that was it, my friends. I hope this tutorial will help you guys with your projects. As you can see, this opens a lot of possibilities for us sprite animators, and I'm very excited to see what creative stuff you guys will be creating. Chop, have a good day.